Yeah. So when you say mass bankruptcies, is that companies specifically? Is that governments as well? Do you think who would be the people to be affected by that?
Well, in the past, it's been companies and individuals. In other words, the 1930s Great Depression scenario was the private sector just completely lost it. So, businesses failed, banks failed, people lost their houses, and all of the debt that was associated with these things was wiped out via default. Now, the Fed would like to avoid that, or all the central banks would like to avoid that, because that's an immediate crisis, and the guys in charge get blamed for it when it happens. So they, in the last few cycles, have aggressively tried to inflate their way out of what would have otherwise been a 1930s-style deflationary crash. And, they've kind of sort of succeeded in the sense that we're not in another Great Depression, but they've done that at the cost of massive increases in debt, which is now turning into massive increases in interest expense. So it's not clear that they can inflate their way out of this next one, but it's fairly safe to say that they'll try. So we're going to do that experiment where you take this amount of debt that has never been seen before in human history, and you say, all right, we're going to try to grow the economy by making this debt massively easier to pay off by inflating away the currency. And we're going to see what happens, And I kind of tend to think that we'll get what the Austrian School of Economics calls the crack-up boom, which is a point at which a critical mass of people figure out that the government intends to basically inflate away the currency forever. And so they bail on the currency. So it's not, a supply of the currency driven crisis. It's a lack of confidence or a disappearance of confidence in the currency crisis. And what happens then is everybody just takes their paychecks and they buy real stuff that governments can't inflate away. And that pushes up the price of those things, which manifests as inflation, and things spin out of control. So in the past, many, many countries have gone through something like this. Where they screwed up their currency, they tried to inflate away their debt, and everything just blew up on them. But in the past, it happened in the context of a sound money world. Everybody else was on the gold standard. So this one country, Weimar Germany, let's say, inflated away their currency, but then they just went back on the gold standard and normal life resumed. Nobody's on the gold standard anymore. Everybody's got a fiat currency. So the thing that's coming might be global, where Europe, big chunks of Asia, and most of North America have some kind of a currency crisis simultaneously. And that's uncharted territory. We don't know how that's going to go, but it's safe to say that it'll be pretty chaotic, right? Because there's nobody left to bail out the countries whose currencies blow up. And eventually we get the Jim Rickards currency reset, where we go back to some kind of gold standard or something comparable. But in the meantime, chaos, and that's what's coming. Although the timing is very hard to predict, because so many tricks are being played by the world's central banks, and a lot of those tricks have succeeded in kicking the can down the road. But eventually, you reach the point where the tricks don't work anymore. So the only real question is that 2024, or is it 2028 or 2030? And I don't know. I don't have a good record for short-term timing calls, but I think the long-term trends are basically fixed in place. And as an individual, our challenge is positioning ourselves so that we are at least protected and maybe benefit from these big changes that are almost certain to happen eventually.